Every so often, a document surfaces that forces you to pause, not because of what it proves, but because of what it suggests. In this case, we're looking at claims tied to military sources, structured information that, if taken seriously, raises questions far beyond isolated sightings. Because this isn't just about objects in the sky. It's about presence, patterns, intent, and the possibility that whatever is being observed isn't new. But as always, the challenge isn't just the information itself, it's how we interpret it.
You are deciding how much to accept.
Yeah, and that line isn't always clear, so let's take a closer look.
I have been told 3 times, Linda, there really is a base inside the center of Mars, and that the extraterrestrials that they have found legacies from are related to the Phoenicians of the Mediterranean, who were the best shipbuilders, and that the face on Mars is a resembled, the way it's been said to me, they resemble what these Phoenicians were. But where did the Phoenicians come from, and how many planets going out in all directions, let's say 20 light years, how many planets probably have life? I'm working on what might be another book, but I definitely am working with somebody who has aerospace knowledge, retired, and has said to me, Linda, I worked on a project where we were trying to find out if we went from the Earth out like 25 light years and then you drew a circle. He said there probably would be at least 10 planets with civilizations. This is not exaggeration. This is the reality. And we, as Homo sapien on this planet in the 20th and the 21st centuries, it's as if we've been rammed by the oligarch goals that we humans on the general population of the Earth are not going to be given any insights about our real, true genetic past, where we came from. As this man said, Homo sapien is at least the product of 3 different extraterrestrial groups experimenting on Earth. For some reason, that doesn't offend me, it doesn't scare me. I just simply want to know what the truth is. And report it. And report it in what the Greeks said, if only humans could embrace each other and look in their eyes and say, fellow being, I honor you. And that this whole population could relate to being a fellow being, not something to conquer. And this is a sober introduction. I debated whether to go into this at all because we've got so many problems on the Earth. But I think that what could be one of the offshoots, if we would start telling the truth, and all of the leaders would tell the same truth, that we're on a planet that may be facing a variety of challenges in the next few years. And if they would just tell us all the truth, and that we would be a civilization that could help each other get ready for something that might be coming that could be, as Lou Elizondo has said, he has information, and he put it up on one of the feeds and said, something is coming. Something is coming and it's massive. And he hasn't filled out the details, but I respect him very much. We have to get past this feeling that there are just tiny pieces of humanity who know the truth, and the rest of us are kept in the dark. And in that spirit, I'm going to share with you some information tonight and hope that we will be back again next year, and I hope I'll be here next year. Okay, my colleague Ian Holling has a clicker. We're trying this, where I am going to speak and he is going to move the messages and the images. And let's start with the first slide, which is up. Is this photograph of a silver UFO pod on the back of a military truck the same UFO in the historically famous July 8th, 1947 Roswell Daily Record headline, quote, Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region, end quote. And this particular aerospace source sent me this alleged non-human photo from a reliable source of his in a very large aerospace company. I know where he works. I know who works around him. I know some of the details about our solar system that they are studying and still has not been reported to us publicly. And this is he sent this to me, not with the idea of blowing up the grays or the tall whites or others as being also extraterrestrials. He sent this to me as, quote, this strange image, Linda, is from a young man who cleaned out his grandfather's house after he died and came across this strange photo, plus 8 other similar photos from his grandfather's military work in the late 1940s. And the grandson told me, quote, there were 9 photos, pictures, total, and all 9 are in our aerospace office possessions for further investigation and review. The one photo I included has been determined authentic, both in date and film coding type, and is cataloged as an original, quote, male gray ET, close quote, but there are many different types. It's one of the things that eventually I hope we will all learn. A gray may come in 4 or 5 different physical appearances, but the government documents are only about grays, so you don't have the breakdown in the details that our government actually knows. And in these 9 images, he said the one photo I included to you has been determined authentic, both in date and film coding type, and is cataloged as an original male gray ET, a specific type. And at reddit.com, a similar high strangeness image was also posted, but it was deemed a product of artificial intelligence when it was released at Reddit, AI. However, our research group, this is him talking to me, was alerted by officials within JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command. It's a component command, also known as US SOCOM. JSOC is the elite US military command overseeing top-tier special mission units like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 for counterterrorism and high-stake missions. JSOC is based in Fort Liberty, North Carolina, that was formerly known as Fort Bragg. About the alleged strange ET photos, my aerospace source said, quote, through the CIA, we were able to reach out to the grandson and acquired all 9 original photos for further analysis. And all 9, he says, seem to be genuine, close quote. Without more details of why this particular type being released into the public through me and through him on Reddit and my Earth Files YouTube channel. Why have they done this particular type at this particular point? And he said, quote, the most disturbing aspect of this 1947 investigation were other bodies found not far from the Roswell landing zone that looked as if, quote, They had been dissected as you would a frog. It is not known if Army field surgeons had performed exploratory surgery on these bodies. Animal parts were reportedly discovered inside the craft of Landing Zone 2, but this cannot be confirmed. And this was a note from the U.S. War Department memorandum dated July 22nd, 1947. Now, my confidential aerospace source also reported to me, quote, "Linda, I have been putting together materials for you to analyze, which will validate our current long-range spacecraft exploration program," close quote. Here is the U.S. Space Force logo for deep quantum tunneling spacecraft on the USS Curtis LeMay, the USS Hoyt Vandenberg, and the USS Roscoe Hellenketter. How many of you knew that there were spacecraft that are going between solar systems that are these names? Now, is there anybody here outside of my work who has seen this information anywhere else? I can't quite see. There's maybe half a dozen, 3 or 4. And this work on the U.S. deep quantum tunneling spacecraft has been going on for years. And Ian, I'm going to the day after Roswell. Even U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, who worked in the Pentagon during and after World War II, wrote a 1996 book, The Day After Roswell, subtitled, quote, "A former Pentagon official reveals the U.S. government's shocking UFO cover-up about UFOs," close quote. In the days after the now famous Roswell UFO crash of July 8, 1947, other reports of mysterious, round, cigar-shaped, triangle-shaped aerial craft began to erupt in many parts of the Earth. By 1983, when I was director of special projects at the CBS TV station in Denver and started work there after doing medical programming in Boston, and before that I had spent 2 years doing aerospace and a variety of documentaries during my work on my master's degree at Stanford University. And by 1983, I was director of special projects at the CBS TV station in Denver. And I was focused on science and environment documentaries. And that's when I met an elderly rancher who lived in Corona, New Mexico. And he said that he had known Mac Brazel, the rancher, who found strange crash debris on his land between Roswell and Corona on the July 4th, 1947 weekend. And the Corona resident said, quote, "I heard there was a horrible secret about that crash," close quote. American government policy ever since July of 1947 has been to deny ET existence on Earth at all costs. And that cover-up began with the fear and shock that U.S. President Harry Truman and his close associates felt when they learned that dissected humanoids and animal parts were found inside and near at least 2 of the UFOs that crashed in New Mexico between Corona and Roswell the first week of July 1947. Another serious investigator was Robert M. Wood, PhD, aerospace engineer at McDonnell Douglas in Missouri. He researched the July 1947 Roswell UFO crash and found a document stamped, all caps, Ultra Interplanetary Phenomena Unit Summary, an Intelligence Assessment Number, and quote, "The extraordinary recovery of fallen airborne objects in the state of New Mexico between 4 July and 6 July of 1947. This summary was prepared by Headquarters Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, Scientific and Technical Branch, Counterintelligence Directorate, close quote. I'd like a show of hands. Has anybody in any capacity heard about the United States Headquarters Interplanetary Phenomena Unit? The Interplanetary Phenomena Unit summary was approved on September 4th, 1960, by National Security Agency Director Lieutenant General John A. Samford and CIA Director Alan Dulles, by authority of the National Security Agency, and this highly classified document reported that, quote, on arrival at Landing Zone 2, personnel assessed the finds at 3 landing zones as not belonging to any aircraft, rocket, weapons, or balloon tests that are normally conducted from surrounding bases. And the first reports indicated that the first crash that investigators from Roswell Army Airfield went to, they found alien bodies. It's in the reports. They're not coming up with jerry-rigged names. Found alien bodies in crashed aerial vehicles at Landing Zone 2 site and west to the White Sands Missile Range, also in July 1947. Landing Zone 1 was the crash site between Corona and Roswell, and a third, Landing Zone 3, at the bottom of a map that we've got, is the Mescalero Apache Indian Reservation. And I'm still in sync with you, right? We're trying this a different way than we've done before. So we're at slide 17. As to the bodies, quote, they were recovered at Landing Zone 2, and it appeared that none of the 5 crew members survived entry into our atmosphere due to unknown causes. Dr. Detlef Bronk has been asked to assist in the autopsy of one well-preserved cadaver to be done by Major Charles B. Ray. And from that description, the team was able to learn, and from those photographs taken by intelligence photographers, the occupants appear in most respects human, with some anatomical differences in the head, eyes, hands, and feet. They have a slight build, about 5 feet tall, with grayish-pink skin color. They have no hair on their bodies and are clothed with a tight-fitting flight suit that appears to be fireproof. It seems that the bodies looked as if they had been burned on the head and the hands where it was not covered by whatever this material was. Their overall stature reminds one of young children. It is believed that there were male and female genders present, but it was hard to distinguish. The IPU Intelligence Assessment Paragraph 11 states, quote, as to the bodies recovered at Landing Zone 2, it did appear that none of the 5 crew members survived entry into our atmosphere due to unknown causes, and Dr. Detlef Bronk has been asked to assist in the autopsy of one particularly well-preserved cadaver to be done by Major Charles Ray. From what descriptions the team was able to learn, and from photographs taken by intelligence photographers, the occupants appear in most respects human, with some anatomical differences in the head, eyes, hands, and feet, and they are of a slight build, not much above 5 feet tall, and they have no hair on their bodies and are clothed in these tight-fitting flight suits that appear to have the ability to be fireproof. And going on to slide 18, in addition to the dissected humanoids and animal parts, there was another disturbing event that would also have provoked the Truman administration's decision to keep all of the real facts about UFOs and what was in them from the press and public. And that was the year 1952. Truman's Majestic 12 Special Studies Group. It was Truman, the Democratic president, who formed MJ-12. And that Truman's Majestic 12 Special Studies Group issued its first annual report as, quote, a review of the President's special panel to investigate the capture of unidentified plan form. That was a word used for anything that was oval or circular, as they saw in UFOs. They called them plan form space vehicles by the U.S. Armed Forces and agencies, meaning that they had been picked up by military alert, but they were considered unknown. Moving to slide 19. Page 5 of the top secret MJ-12 report states in a paragraph entitled F, on the alphabetical line, Biological Warfare Programs. Paragraph F, Biological Warfare Programs, quote, in the US and UK, biological warfare programs are in field test stages. Discovery of new virus and bacteria agents so lethal that serums derived by genetic research can launch medical science into unheard of fields of biology. The samples extracted from bodies found in New Mexico have yielded new strains of a retrovirus not totally understood, but they give promise of the ultimate biological warfare weapon. The danger lies in the spread of airborne and bloodborne outbreaks of diseases in large populations with no medical cures available, close quote, 1947 and on. And in 1983, while researching UFOs and ETs for a TV documentary, I traveled around New Mexico, and a military source told me that MJ-1 was a separate agency from the National Security Agency and from the Central Intelligence Agency, that there are 12 men who have this power, 11 of which today go back still to the 1940s. He also said that, quote, MJ-12 is related through the National Security Council to the White House and American presidents directly. Then, around 1949, under President Harry Truman, the United States allegedly made direct contact with UFO EBINs, the extraterrestrial biological entities, close quote, but there were medical concerns that the alien life forms could spread retroviruses to Earth's human population. And from Majestic 12 Project first annual report in 1952, retrovirus was not a common medical concept in 1947 to 1952. Examples of retroviruses are HIV, leukemia, and the deadly Ebola virus that causes its victims to hemorrhage blood from every orifice. Retroviruses that cause its victims to hemorrhage are composed only of RNA, which can end up getting healthy DNA to incorporate the insidious RNA instructions into the genome of the human cells, which the retroviruses then destroy. And what all those words mean is that in the 1940s, the President of the United States and Congress, some, and certainly the intelligence agencies, they knew that they were dealing with something that, if it caught hold in human bodies and started sweeping across the nation, they would not have any way to deal with it. The panel was concerned over the contamination of several SED engineer personnel upon coming in contact with debris near the power plant. One technician was overcome and collapsed when he attempted the removal of an alien body. Another medical technician went into a coma 4 hours after placing a body in an alien body in a rubber body bag. All 4 were rushed to Los Alamos for observation. All 4 later died of seizures and profuse bleeding. All 4 were wearing protective suits when they came in contact with body fluids from the occupants. Paragraph 9. Autopsies on the 4 dead SED technicians are not conclusive. It is believed that the 4 may have suffered from some form of toxin or a highly contagious disease. Tissue samples are currently being kept at Fort Detrick, Maryland. And on page 9, Annex A, paragraphs 8 and 9 of this top secret MJ-12 First Annual Report, 1952. It describes what happened to several Special Engineer Detachment personnel who arrived at a non-human crash scene and became extremely ill and died. And in the opinion of the senior AEC medical officer, current medical equipment and supplies in the United States are wholly inadequate in dealing with a large-scale outbreak of the alien virus. And we're still talking about July 1947 and the consequences thereafter. Paragraph 13. In the opinion of the Senior Atomic Energy Commission medical officer, current medical equipment and supplies are wholly inadequate in dealing with a large-scale outbreak of this alien virus, close quote. Paragraph 10. The panel was also concerned with the detection of airborne release of radiation over the state of New Mexico. The AFTAC detachment from McClellan Air Force Base has conducted several airborne monitor flights over Site L2. Radiation readings indicate a high neutron count was recorded as the plane flew over the site, and then the neutron count dropped off as the plane flew a considerable distance from the site, close quote. AFTAC is an acronym for Air Force Technical Applications Center, and this was based in 1947 at McClellan Air Force Base. And then it moved to the 45th Space Wing at Patrick Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral, Florida, where they are spaceport customers, and they've been there for a very long time. 24 slide. Now, here again, looking at that, this is a true headline. The government agencies and people that have tried to convince for the last 40, 50 years that this was just a mogul balloon and it was all blown up and it was like a high school prank, and there's nothing about any of this that fits in any of those categories. It's just that when the government's desperate to keep us from knowing the truth, that's what they do. This is a true headline dated July 8th, 1947 by the Roswell Daily Record in Roswell, New Mexico. And the following day, a counterintelligence operation was set in motion when, quote, Commanding General of the 8th Air Force, Roger M. Ramey, was ordered to cover up what military insiders from the Pentagon to New Mexico were whispering to each other, that what crashed near Roswell was an advanced interplanetary spacecraft piloted by gray-skinned, large black-eyed non-humans. They were telling each other the truth. It took them decades to back up what they had seen with their own eyes, which was that they were ordered to cover up what the military insiders were whispering about, this being an advanced interplanetary spacecraft piloted by gray-skinned, large black-eyed non-humans, July 8th, 1947. Eventually, the military would call them extraterrestrial biological entities, and that's where that acronym EBEN, E-B-E or E-B-E-N came from. And 32 years after that, in September of 1979, I was doing investigative documentary and live studio programs for the CBS station in Denver, Colorado, which is 504 miles north of Roswell. And that 1979 fall, was when I received my first phone calls, sheriff's offices, pathology labs, about bloodless, trackless animal mutilations linked by ranchers to moving lights and beams from UFOs in the night sky coming down into pastures where the dead mutilated animals would be found without blood or tracks around them. I remember that by September to October in 1979, when I was with Sheriff Tex Graves in northern Colorado, and I went with him to see a first animal mutilation myself. And I can still remember as we walked slowly toward the animal and there was dust and dirt around the body. And the sheriff was not talking. He was waiting for me. And as we got very close, maybe 15 feet from the body, I still remember the very first thing that hit me, and he hadn't pointed this out, is that there was this fine-grained dirt, and it was all around this cow's body, and I could see where there were excisions and no blood. But the thing that really got me, I said, Sheriff, where are the tracks? Whatever did this animal is lying here, and there's not a track anywhere, not even underneath the abdomen. How did this animal get here? And he said, Linda, that is what has haunted me for the whole last year. And he said, if I can help you in your investigations and you can help me in mine, he said, we can go forward and we can keep researching. Because he said, a veterinarian told me privately, we're dealing with something here that we don't have. We don't have the physical equipment to accomplish what is happening to these cows. And when the blood was examined by more than one lab, they came to the conclusion that the hemoglobin and the collagen were literally cooked in the several different animal excisions that I was able to get into pathology. And it was not maybe, it was, this is definitely some kind of technology we do not have in 1979. And as this phenomena started expanding, the reports in 79, in that fall, getting into the winter, they were coming from everywhere. It was Australia, it was Europe, it was the United States, it was Canada, it was all over. And as the phenomena expanded in both hemispheres, I have personally been able to talk somewhat confidentially with military, government, and aerospace sources who told me that they knew for a fact, and they knew that the government of the United States knew for a fact, that EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, are from another solar system and for unexplained reasons have needed blood and tissues from Earth life for their own survival, and that ETs are the mutilators. Slide 25. By the 1990s, as it kept unrolling and I was going everywhere and ended up doing A Strange Harvest, which was the first documentary ever done on animal mutilations in UFOs, and it was the highest rated population audience in the history of KMGH TV in Denver, both leading up to the night of the broadcast and following the broadcast. It meant that there were over 1 million people who had enough knowledge that they tuned in instead of running away and being afraid of this story. They were proving by being there, they probably knew something about what was happening. Well, by the 1990s, as I had been investigating and doing a lot of work on lots of facets of this, in addition to TV broadcasts of documentary films, I also produced 4 large books with dozens of color and black and white images from my investigations with ranchers, veterinarians, and law enforcement. And I have continued periodically to study microscopic evidence that the bloodless cuts were being done with an unknown technology that was cooking the hemoglobin and the collagen as it cut into the animal tissues. And as one sheriff said, we don't have a laser that does this. But what if it's not a laser? What was it?
This is where the conversation starts to move beyond isolated claims and into something more structured. We're not just hearing about events, we're hearing about patterns, repeated observations, similar descriptions, consistent behavior, and that's where things become harder to dismiss, but also harder to interpret. And because patterns suggest something systematic, but not necessarily understood.
You look for consistency to create certainty.
It's how we try to make sense of things.
It is also how you convince yourselves quickly.
Fair. But consistency doesn't always mean clarity. It just means something is happening the same way. And more than once. And that raises a key question. Are we identifying a real underlying phenomenon? Or are we connecting details that only appear related?
So why hasn't the US government told the truth? That we humans, Homo sapien on Earth, are not alone in this vast cosmos. And I continue to be contacted by UFO abductees, investigators, confidential military, aerospace, and astronomy professionals who always ask for anonymity because the consequences of simply telling the truth about the complex nature of the evidence of extraterrestrial biological entities of several types interacting on our planet, not only now, but there's no question in my mind they've been here doing all kinds of things going back at least 270 million years, according to one aerospace source. And that if you go back to where there was a split in the genetic evolving road between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon Homo sapien, that's us. Neanderthal was a slightly bigger humanoid with a bigger brain capacity. Logically, Neanderthal should have superseded Cro-Magnon Homo sapien. But approximately, there are different dates, 14,000 years ago and back to 45,000 years ago, there was evidence that there was some kind of a manipulation, and Cro-Magnon Homo sapien ended up surviving beyond Neanderthal. Who, what, why? Has this been going on in this planet for millennia? That's part of the big, huge mystery that keeps me going. All right, and let's go to 26th slide. I have learned over the years to keep transcripts, letters, photos, and drawings in a metal file cabinet until I moved from Philadelphia to Albuquerque in 2004. And I stacked a lot in a double car garage. And only a couple of months ago, I found in the bottom drawer of a metal file cabinet that had been rammed in the first move. And so it didn't open, and I didn't realize that it still had files in it. And in a slant of the metal, I was persistent enough this time that I was able to pull up the metal, and here were these old and fragile pages that had anonymously been sent to me about Majestic 12 government research and their IPU discoveries, Interplanetary Phenomena Unit discoveries, since their July 1947 arrival at Landing Zone 2 between Roswell and Corona, New Mexico. And these, what I'm going to unfold, have been in that file cabinet since before 2004. But finding them, it was like a revelation. It's how far back, more information than even today, that some of what I had in that file, which related to my doing animal mutilation research and having the government trying to deflect me while people like HBO and CNN came to me wanting to know if I would do a documentary about animal mutilations. And I wanted to, for both CNN and for just in general, people who were making documentaries. And I end up hearing from both of the producers that they got a call from somebody in the government who said, "You're not going to have Linda, Moulton, Howe do these documentaries." And one of the men who told me was working at CNN, and I was in Atlanta, and I was working and loving it. And everybody was so enthusiastic about the scripts that I had turned in. And both cases, HBO and CNN, the producers told me, "We don't understand it. We had everything a go. Your work is great. But we had a block in finance." Both companies, a block in finance, which means that you can control what happens or you can edit it out if you have controlling power over large accounting offices in production places. I guess that's what I presume. And we're now at slide 27. Thank you. On arrival at Landing Zone 2, personnel assessed the finds as not belonging to any aircraft, rocket, weapons, or balloon tests that are normally conducted from surrounding bases. But nobody was reporting stuff like that in the newspapers, or radio, or television. It was all that it was a mogul balloon. And the first reports indicated that the first crash investigators from Roswell Army Air Force was the Landing Zone 1, described as an AAF top secret mogul balloon project. That's what they threw out. When scientists from the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory arrived to inspect Landing Zone 2, it became apparent to all concerned that what had crashed in the desert at near between Roswell and Corona was something out of this world, and those are the words that they used, close quote. And tonight, I would like to share with you something special. I've never done this before with audiences. I've only thought about it. And that is, like that file cabinet was filled, and that what I learn can come through a variety of documents, books, photos, film, and go into these drawers, metal, so hopefully nothing will happen to them, that I'm going to share with you now some of the information that I hadn't seen for a very long time until I was able to get that file cabinet open 2 months ago. And I'm going to share with you what was on those pages that goes back years. I hadn't even realized myself how much was there. 28th slide. Quote, in 1950, EBA number 1 told us a great deal about our own solar system and about the universe. Mars did support life at one time. The planet contained only animal-like creatures similar to our dinosaurs, and they lasted a few million years before they died of radiation exposure. But a piece that I found later, and is not part of this scan, and I want you to know, is that a man who was working at NASA called me, and this is a few years back, not a decade, but more recently, and said, I want to show you that I have proof that there is a base at the center of Mars. And in that base, I have been there. A colleague of mine have been there. The United States government doesn't want anyone to know who the occupiers are of this particular core camp inside of Mars. He said, they remind us of the Phoenicians, Phoenicians, the Phoenicians that were considered the best shipbuilders that anybody had seen up to them and for a while later. And that what I felt like I was being handed was, look at this. This is the truth. Mars has a base for ETs on the inside, ETs that have been on this planet, building underground and inside of mountains, and that there is so much, if we were told the truth, there is so much about other life. But instead, the policy has been to hide all of the facts. And one of the facts that I've never heard before right now, I've never heard this ever, and I'm 84 and I've been working for 70 years. Neptune, the planet Neptune, contains an ancient alien base. Even forefathers built a base on Neptune to explore our solar system 10,000 years ago. Many aliens have used our moon as a base to explore Earth, and in 1908, an alien spacecraft exploded 8 kilometers above Tunguska in Soviet Siberia, and that was an Eben craft. An antimatter pod was accidentally ejected into our atmosphere, which resulted in a nuclear explosion equivalent to a 1 megaton thermonuclear blast. And in the year 1922, an Eben craft landed near Roswell, New Mexico, and left 2 robots to explore the desert area. In 1928, the Ebens returned and they retrieved those extraterrestrial robots. During World War II, Ebens conducted thousands of reconnaissance flights over Europe and the Far East. However, they did not interfere in the conflict. And this is important to interject here. I've done this story on my Earth Files YouTube channel, that William Mills Tompkins, in the Navy, released 2 volumes before his death at age 94, about 8 years ago. And in doing his books, Bob Wood, an aerospace engineer, had contacted me. I wanted to interview him. He wanted to be interviewed. And I did a 5-hour recorded interview with William Mills Tompkins about his huge experience in World War II in an aerospace office. It was all secret. And it was one of the most powerful interviews I personally have ever done. He had no reason to lie. And he said at one point, and expanded on it, he said, you have to understand, our government has known, I know, World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. And then talked to me for the 4 or 5 hours about the implications of that sentence. In just the last year, I have had 2 people who are active working in aerospace, and they have contacted me indirectly through other people just to let me know, when you announced what William Mills Tompkins told you, that World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies, they each said, that is the true story that has never been told. During the last 2,000 years that the Ebens have been exploring Earth, they have lost 25 of their spacecraft across the Earth. Only 20 have been recovered by the Ebens, and we in the United States have recovered 3 of them. The flying craft that are located in Nevada have either been loaned to use from the extraterrestrial or have been recovered from their crashes or whatever happened that brought their craft down. We can fly them but we can't understand all of the instrumentation contained in the craft. 29. Everything that the aliens do on Earth is sanctioned. The implication being, like what President Trump essentially has been doing, is saying that he has the authority to okay or block anything and everything that there is about UFOs and ETs. It's sanctioned. But they are, what they're doing now is, I think, politically motivated, and that there's a logistical plan of we may end up getting some serious information, but we may not, because they didn't on these other earlier rounds. And in the people who were talking about that they were involved and going out on missions specifically to areas where there was a spacecraft craft, and then having the responsibility either to bury it, they've buried a lot of things, or get it to someplace else. And this particular source said, quote, "The flying craft that are located in Nevada have either been loaned to us or they have been recovered from the non-humans, either to us or to the non-humans." And then, slide 29. Everything that the aliens do on Earth is sanctioned. That's where I left off. Either formally or informally by our government. However, we have not authorized the aliens to harm or kill humans. To the best of my knowledge, the aliens have not purposely killed or harmed any human being. And to be honest, I have to say, I'm not certain that is true. The crop circles are a form of communication, but to understand them, you must be totally briefed into the whole program. I would very much agree, having spent most of the 90s in the summer in England investigating the whole crop formation scene, which it involved things that happened that were eerie the whole time that I was there. And one example to share with you briefly, because this happened with crop formations a lot, and people didn't report it because they were afraid that humans would think that they were crazy if they said what happened. In my case, it was a huge, enormous formation. There were two men at one end. I was with a woman that we all had gone on crop formation trips together. So there's two women, two men, huge. I can't remember, it was like 325 feet long, incredible pattern. And it was after midnight. And we were doing this to stay out all night because we were also very interested in all the moving lights and beams that were being reported. And she was standing between the entrance into this one end of this gigantic pattern. She was here, and I had walked myself over where it looked like it was moonlight. It looked like it was an ocean, which sometimes the weed in England will. It seems still, and it seems like it's almost like water. And I just walked over. With that was the thought of how beautiful this is. It looks like water with the moonlight. And she was examining something on the ground when suddenly I heard whoosh, 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 whoosh. It was as loud as that would be in this room. It was loud. It just came right at me, if you can say sound. And I didn't go to fear as much as startled curiosity. But then it was so clear, and I said, "Hey, can you see this? Can you hear this?" She said, "I can hear, but I don't see anything." I said, "I think there's something that is coming toward us." And she moved to the other side of the pattern. And I decided I would stand there. I don't know why. I just wanted to know, what is this? And with the divine field force as my witness, because there was some moonlight, there was a little bit of shadow. And you know what I mean. And in that, the angles of the shadow, I suddenly saw what looked like a black circle on top. Crunch. It went down. I saw it. And then another one. And then another one. And I said, Jill, she's a dear friend, Jill, can you see this? And she turned around. She didn't walk to where I was. And she said, it looks like footsteps in the wheat. I said, I agree. And it's coming at me. But do you see anything that is attached to the feet? And we started laughing. And I walked over. I don't know why. I love to get to the truth of phenomena. I don't move to fear. I don't know why. I want to know the truth. So I moved over to the place where the very first sound was. And I stood there and I'm looking, and by God, something made steps like this again. It was just like a man's shoe, big, coming like this, right toward me. And this is the most interesting part. I still didn't move. I didn't back up. I didn't turn around. I just, what are you? I want to know, what are you? And that's the way I was talking. And whatever it was, it was like you knew that it was leaving. It was leaving. It was no more steps. And I turned to Jill and I said, do you think extraterrestrials could have body density and do what we have just seen, and the whole time they were there, but they know how to block our ability to see them, which is what Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he made Predator, the popular Hollywood film about what he was playing a role, that in Vietnam, military people reported over and over again. You didn't hear it much in public, but you heard it from men who were there, that they would see in all of their guns and everything, they would see something that looked like a standing up alligator, and then they either would challenge it or move toward it, and then that, whatever it was, would disappear. So the invisibility and the interaction with us, but us never being able to touch them, get where they are, and have communication, is one of the true mysteries of all of this phenomena. Why are we here? Why did they make us if they can't even shake our hand and tell us what's going on? It makes me nervous. What is the real goal? Now, just back to where I left off, about animal mutilations that were occurring. And they were performed by aliens. There were citizens who would see something that was silver and bright white out in a pasture. And they would try to get there in a tractor or with a truck. And there would be a beam of light coming from something that was round in the sky. And sometimes a few people saw an animal rise up. I've talked with cowhands who have said that they've seen not only the animals rise up into a craft, they've seen animals being lowered in the beam down to a certain point, and then the animal is dropped onto the ground, and it has no ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, or rectal tissue. That's the common harvest. To complicate matters, to cover up the animal mutilations, our government launched a military program to test certain biological drugs on animals. And this was to cover up what they all knew in the Pentagon, JSOC, CIA, NSA, DIA, and offices you've never heard of, that they wanted it to be gone. They did not want people to know anything. They wanted to take over everything 100%. And this was a very interesting other comment from one person who said, this was to cover up the alien program. And to answer your question, Linda, about who created Homo sapien. And this is a really heavy-duty MJ-12 guy. And this is what he said when I said, who created Homo sapien? Think of a low man's voice. God did. He created the universe and all living creatures. This question cannot be easily answered. Maybe someday when you understand the entire program, you will understand this very difficult and dangerous subject. He said the items found in Thailand have been here since the middle 1980s, and we just haven't been very good at locating them. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, the Shroud of Turin. Believe me, when you understand the entire story, from the beginning to the end, your faith in God will be strengthened, not weakened. Your love of God will always be there, and your hate for the evil one will grow. That is a title, Linda. You know it is a title for Satan or the devil in Christian theology, representing the personal embodiment of wickedness, deception, and opposition to God.
At this point, we've covered a lot of ground: claims, patterns, possible timelines, and a lot of interpretation layered on top of that. And this is usually where things get difficult, because the more complex the picture becomes, the easier it is to start connecting everything into a single narrative. But that doesn't always mean the narrative is accurate. It just means it fits.
You prefer complete stories.
We do. It's uncomfortable leaving things unresolved. But when information is this fragmented, when it comes from different sources, different perspectives, there's always a risk of seeing structure where there might only be coincidence.
You are very skilled at pattern creation.
Maybe a little too skilled. So maybe the better approach here isn't to rush to a conclusion, but to sit with the uncertainty, to recognize what we know, what we don't, and what might still be missing.
At that point, I remember a whole lot of things that are still challenging for me to write or communicate. But there was a sudden sort of sense of, well, are the Ebens like us? Do they have joints in their body? What kind of blood? And the answer was from one of these people involved with keeping these files. The blood is green, chlorophyll, chloroplast-like, but with better fighting mechanism of white blood cells and backup cells to battle bacteria and viruses. It's also, the ET blood is thicker and more viscous than our blood. What about genitals? Similar to ours, copulate but without emotion, simply an act for procreation and nothing else. Females have fallopian tubes and uterus. Babies are born at about 1 to 2 pounds, and the brains are programmed at birth for mate and work. The skin is blue-gray in these particular ones, varying in shade from light to dark depending upon the intensity of the atmospheric light. The face is flat, no nose at all, only holes. There is something akin to silk threads, which is written in one of these communiques. Silk threads come down from the head, covering near the ears. And they found that this is antenna for communication back to craft base. The beings are built genetically with the antenna that communicates with their craft. There was a, quote, Star War battle between the talls and the shorts that lasted 300 years. Interestingly, I had heard exactly that sentence about probably 5 full years before this communication took place. The talls are more aggressive and control the little robot cyborgs of the Judy Doherty story, which is in my Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2. Betty Andreessen, another incredible case, and others. The Ebens are peace-loving, not emotional. They do not understand the need for war, and they were very disappointed in the United States-Vietnam War days. There was intense UFO concentration in Vietnam, and the Ebens intend to prevent nuclear war on our planet now, no matter what. 31. Somehow, the Ebens and Talls came to a truce in their war and are now both on our planet, seeming to ignore each other, tolerate each other. Mr. X says the Air Force does not know of any communication between the two alien groups, even though both are working with the U.S. Air Force. They're trading off technology for base land and the tall ones' right to mutilate animals. I ask, what about technology in terms of their advancement? How advanced are they compared to what you, an aerospace engineer, know? And his answer was, the Ebens are 25,000 years ahead of us. Since 1949, EBA shared much scientific, cultural, and historical material now contained in 18 volumes buried somewhere in MJ-12 in the Pentagon, DIA, CIA. Stealth bomber is an Eben technology given so far only to the United States, not to the Soviets. But tall ones who are doing the mutilations and who did the 1975 missile silo interventions, what are they giving to the United States? The tall ones are using DNA from our animals to build humanoids to carry work out back on their planets. Supposed to be pig-like and not found attractive by female aliens, and that last comment was not a joke. It was attributable to Paul Benowitz, and if any of you in here have read a lot of UFO history, Paul Benowitz played a very important role for quite a long time in his research, and that's who they're referencing here. Why do the tall ones need humanoids if they have the little 3-foot robots and other robots to do their work? Is there a potential for human Homo sapiens slavery here? Are the Ebens the only reason why it hasn't happened? Would they go to war with the tall ones again to prevent our being misused? The UFOs of the tall ETs are darker gray color, can change all the light around the craft from red to green to orange, and the light has something to do with their propulsion system. I was told that in a meeting that came about 1983, and I had done another documentary, and I had people coming to me to give me information, show me photos, and this description of how the craft themselves, the whole craft, is a system, and it involves frequencies, and the frequencies are how they can do dimension jumps. In the presentation that I'm going to do upcoming is about what I've been learning about jumping dimensions, jumping timelines. It's real. It is ET technology. And it was what this particular individual was most interested in and taught me a little bit about what he was learning. Now, another interesting thing is if the color of the lights, which Lou Elizondo, from his work, and you all know who I'm talking about, Lou Elizondo, he was telling me that it became very clear in the unit that he was working in that if a ball of light showed up and it was green, you didn't want to stay around, that there was some kind of ability to interact and actually hurt humans if they were green, but they could be white or yellow or orange and be bobbing around in a room and they wouldn't hurt. And that this is part of what they've all been faced with and trying to learn how it might be used by us. And the bottom line is the light has something to do with their propulsion system. But the Eben craft are mostly white with a band of colors going around the perimeter, and often are the silver ones. This is a very important sentence. Ebens can travel 40 light years in 3 months by nearing the speed of light and then warping time and space. And this is the deep quantum tunneling protocol that I will be speaking about on Monday, February 23rd, here in the Century A room, wherever that is, relation to us, from 2 to 4:30 p.m. And I think this is so important. I have never investigated anything that challenged my mind more than deep quantum tunneling protocol. And it is a huge part of what is happening in the United States right now in terms of what we are in production and what is going to be coming. And one of the men at one point said that he was trying to explain to an audience what deep quantum tunneling protocol was. And he had a napkin on his lap and he held it up and he said, "See this corner?" And showed the square. And he said, "And see this corner? Let's say it's 500 light years from here to here." The Ebens just take this point and they put it here through resonant frequency. And it is as if they step in seconds, light years. Albert Einstein himself was supposed to have conversed with EBA, the extraterrestrial biological entity, about space-time physics. And he learned also that the Ebens don't really wear clothes. They have a thick hide of 2 layers which change color with temperature and light intensity. And one photo in an Air Force file shows EBA actually in a suit and tie. And it was the Air Force effort to see if they could make him normal enough that they might actually be able to introduce him in a meeting. And then the decision was it wouldn't work. Housing. The Ebens live in pueblos and in a desert-like atmosphere. There are rivers and plants, but mostly arid, dry. And that is haunted me, that Whitley Strieber, before Communion was released, Whitley Strieber had gone through an abductee and said, "I want to talk with Linda Moulton Howe." And I was working on the East Coast and a trip was put together and I got to meet Whitley before that book was out, that important book. But what I remembered was I asked him, I said, "Have you been to another planet? Have you been to one of your abducting ET, where they come from?" And he said, "I don't know if I've been there physically, but they have showed me the planet." And he talked about how desert-like it was. And so when I saw this from this current work, I thought maybe some abductees are taken to the same place more than once. And he said another interesting thing, EBA did love to swim in water here on the earth and asked to do it. And he also said they, 33 slide, they eat mostly vegetables and some fruits, and they have little teeth, different than our teeth, and that Iba couldn't digest meat or fats, but Mr. X, who is playing a heavy role in all of this, said it's written that his favorite earth food was ice cream. He would get sick if he ate the wrong thing. And Iba spent most of his time at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, but was also taken to Wright-Patterson and Walker Air Force Base. And people ask, how could he breathe our air? And he said the answer was gas composition of our planet, and Iba's is not too different. At first, Iba would breathe from a tank containing his planet's atmosphere about every hour. But after a while, he didn't even need that. Another question, ask, are the Ebans our forebearers? Iba said that they were. The presidential briefing paper refers to a biology project with Iba, which established an insight into our own evolutionary mysteries. Genetic manipulation at the Cro-Magnon level, earlier, when, for real. That there is a lot of discussion about what the truth is about what happened between Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. Iba was astonished at all our different races. He said the Ebans don't understand what happened, why we don't all look alike like they. There is a very homogeneous Eban society where everyone looks and thinks alike. There is no war, no strife, no money. All is programmed and organized. Money and stores and all was a very difficult concept for Iba to even understand when he was here. The Ebans first came to Earth, he said, 15,000 years ago, and then 5,000, and then 2,000 years ago, when they programmed a Homo sapien to teach us not to fight, but to love each other. Is that why the government of the United States is so interested in the Shroud of Turin? I ask. Mr. X says, that's right. The Shroud of Turin is housed in a specialized climate control case inside the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. It has been located in this cathedral since the year 1578. While the original cloth is not on public display and is rarely shown, the cathedral is its permanent home. High strangeness. Iba carried a communicator with him everywhere he went. It was a 12-inch long rod with coils at the top, and he could communicate mentally, but none of that was sufficient because for Homo sapien, mental telepathy can still be interpreted in various ways by multiple people in a room receiving from Iba, and let's say that I'm transmitting telepathy. Every head, every mind here, you would be getting some form in which when you talk with abductees who go into telepathy, they will have geometric forms. They usually are out here. They're not right there at your eyes. They are like on a screen, an invisible screen, and their communication can be picked up by everyone depending upon who they're trying to reach, apparently, during these telepathic periods. And that is why they decided the United States decided to operate on Iba and create a voice box from his simple larynx for him so he could talk. Believe it or not, I heard that back in that 79 to 80 period when I was doing all the mutilation work. And I thought, oh, this can't be possible. And then it shows up again in these transcripts that I've had in that metal file drawer forever and had not seen this until now. And then it echoes what I've heard before. that they did this simple larynx, and over a rather short period of time after that, they said Iba learned to speak English. That he was shorter than 5 feet, blue-gray skin that changed color with light intensity. That the Ebens come from the Zeta Reticuli binary star system about 50 light years away. At the end of their system is a binary star which also has planets, one of which are the tall ones known as the Swedes. They're very Scandinavian looking. There is no night there. It is always various degrees of brightness. And because of all the light, the Ebens have 3 lids that can be brought across their eyes laterally this way. And they have bright yellow iris cat-shaped pupils. And the lids change thickness over their eyes depending upon light intensity. And I ask, is there any connection between the bright yellow eyes that you're describing and the Greeks? Because the Greeks had yellow eyes. He said, no nose, only holes, but they can smell. No lips, only small straight line where we would have a mouth. The small teeth eat mostly vegetables. Is there a tongue? No tongue described. No hair at all on a head. And ears, only holes, raised areas in the skull. The neck and the vertebrae are more pronounced than ours. Iba could swivel his head around on his neck more than we can. And from a profile, Iba's bones stuck out more in his back. The jaw in his head was fused, where ours moves up and down. Heart and lungs are in the same organ in the Ebens, a simple bag for stomach, excretion from bladder and anus, not certain, but there is excretion through the sun, which would explain why abductees going back 50, 60 years said that they could smell ammonia coming off the skin of the gray beings that had them. 4 fingers, no thumb. The finger joints could extend another inch longer. The feet are pointed with nail-like substance at the end, but no separate toes. High strangeness. On June 18th, 1952, Iba died of a mysterious cause. That day, he was traveling with the colonel between Air Force bases for meetings with scientists and officials. And when he got on the first plane en route, he told the colonel he didn't feel well, but attributed it to food he had eaten. And they went to the meeting and returned to Kirtland Air Force Base and possibly Los Alamos. He was getting much worse and was taken to a hospital where everyone tried to save his life. His temperature changed. There was even consideration given to trying to contact his home planet to summon help, if possible, to fix him. The colonel asked the doctors if he was well enough for him to run an errand, and the doctors thought so. But when the colonel returned to the hospital, Iba told him he was going to die, and he was dead within 15 minutes. The colonel hugged Iba before he was gone.
If you found this interesting, be sure to check out earthfiles.com and Linda's YouTube channel, and both links are in the description below. And if you want to go even deeper, take a look at Contact in the Desert, one of the largest and most well-known UFO conferences, featuring some of the most respected researchers. Thank you for watching.